Substitution is one of the three primary factors in determining your IR35 status. And substitution is the right and opportunity to send in a short-term substitute should you be unavailable or incapacitated for some reason. In order for substitution to be effective, you set up a relationship between your end client, your company, and yourself, like this. Your client engages your company in a business-to-business relationship, and you're engaged by your company to deliver that piece of work. If you're unavailable for some reason, the important thing is that the relationship between your company and your client doesn't change. So if you do seek a substitute, it looks like this. The substitute is engaged by your company, and your company is engaged by the end client. Nothing changes between the end client and your company. You're responsible for finding the substitute. You're in control of the substitute. It's your responsibility to pay for the substitute. And that's the key approach that you need to bear in mind when it comes to substitution. Now, the substitute doesn't need to be an employee of your limited company. It is more than okay for that substitute to be another contractor or other short-term resource. When it comes to effective substitution clauses, there's three tests that we need to consider. First of all, the client needs to allow substitution in the first place. Secondly, the client can't refuse a substitute that you put forward who's suitably qualified. So your client can't approve them, they can't have a right to veto. It needs to be unfettered control by you in supplying a substitute. And finally, as we've just said, your company needs to pay for that substitute, not your end client. And overall, you need to be in control of this process. And just practically, when HMRC look at substitution clauses, they know full well that substitution is quite a rare event. And substitution clauses in contracts are generally pretty strong and robust. So if HMRC wanted to attack substitution, what they would do instead is try and find reasons why your substitution wouldn't work in practice. And that's where things like if a client had to approve it or had to veto it, had the opportunity to veto it, that's where HMRC will take a dim view of your substitution clauses. So we're in this position where you're in control of the substitution process. The client allows it, they can't veto it, and it's cost neutral from a client's point of view. And there's a couple of ways of looking at this. Let's consider this in the context of it being a business-to-business relationship. This is a great thing for a client because you're basically saying that you're going to shoulder the risk of that contract. Should you be unavailable, the work will still be delivered for the same cost to that end client. Now, not all clients see it like this. There's concerns about substitutes. They're worried that you'll turn up for a few weeks and then send in a less able or different substitute. Or perhaps they're just uncomfortable with the entire process of substitution. And that puts us into a difficult place because you need to be able to establish this substitution clause and your right to substitute. Yet your client might be uncomfortable with the degree of control that you have. One of the remedies for this is looking at your termination clauses in your contract. And just remember, a client should be able to terminate your contract should they be unhappy with the work that has been produced, or if you overrun, you're not delivering on time. So that means we can end up with a nice healthy tension of where you may be in control of the substitution process and the client can't get involved or influence that in any way. What they do have to counterbalance that is the opportunity to terminate your contract for not being able to deliver a substitute, therefore creating a gap in your output and your deliverables and causing knock-on delays, or by sending in somebody who was delivering subpar work. And it's this healthy tension which becomes one of the ways to overcome client objections to substitution clauses. And if your client is concerned about substitution, our recommendation is to get them to talk to a specialist IR35 advisor, and they will help to allay some of the concerns and help them to work around the fact that this substitution clause really needs to be there in those contracts.